Looking back on my life now, I realize how cruelly trust can be weaponized against you when you least expect it. It all started with the lottery win, a $2 million jackpot that should have been the golden ticket to a peaceful retirement. Instead, it became the catalyst for betrayal and heartbreak. At first, everyone seemed genuinely happy for me. Neighbors congratulated me. Distant relatives reappeared out of thin air. And even my closest friend, Sarah, was by my side every step of the way. She helped me set up accounts, advised me on investments, and assured me she'd always be there to protect me from sharks. But as weeks turned into months, cracks began to show in her facade. Small withdrawals here, unexplained transfers there. It wasn't until I found myself staring at an almost empty bank account that the full weight of her deception hit me like a freight train. My entire life savings gone. And just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I discovered something far more sinister brewing right under my roof. My adopted daughter, Emily, whom I raised with nothing but love since she was 5 years old, had been secretly plotting to take over my home. Conversations recorded without my knowledge, forged documents prepared behind my back, and a chilling sense of entitlement in her eyes when confronted. How could someone I loved so deeply turn into such a stranger? This wasn't just greed, this was betrayal etched into the very fabric of family. As I sit here in the quiet of my study, surrounded by photographs and mementos from decades past, I can't help but reflect on how exhausting it is to live a life solely dedicated to pleasing others. The weight of expectations has followed me like a shadow for as long as I can remember, but nothing prepared me for the storm that would come when my family turned against one another over something as sacred as our home, the very house where my late husband and I raised our children. It all began innocently enough with conversations about practical decisions. My youngest son, Mark, had been struggling financially, trying to provide for his growing family in an unforgiving economy. He suggested selling the old house, claiming it was too large for just me now, and proposed using the money to buy him a modest home closer to the city. At first, I hesitated, feeling the walls of this house whisper stories of laughter, love, and even heartache. But then came the pressure. From Mark, yes, but also from Emily, my adopted daughter, who'd once seemed so caring, yet now revealed herself to be calculating. They framed their demands as acts of kindness, insisting they only wanted what was best for everyone. But the tension escalated when my eldest son, James, entered the fray. For years, he had played the role of the dutiful child, visiting regularly, bringing gifts, and offering words of comfort whenever I needed them, or so I thought. When talk of selling the house intensified, James suddenly became vocal, arguing fiercely against the idea. His reasoning sounded noble at first. "Mom, this house is your legacy. It's where Dad built his workshop, where we celebrated birthdays, where you found solace after losing him. You shouldn't give it up for anyone." Yet beneath his polished speeches lay a darker truth, one that unraveled during a heated family meeting. As voices rose and accusations flew across the room, Sarah, my supposed closest friend, accidentally let slip that James had already consulted a lawyer about securing his share of the inheritance. The betrayal hit me like a freight train. All those years of believing he cared deeply for me, when in reality, he saw me as nothing more than a means to an end, a stepping stone to financial security. The confrontation reached its peak one fateful evening. The air was thick with resentment as Mark accused James of greed, while James retaliated by calling Mark selfish for wanting to sell the house. Meanwhile, Emily sat silently, her eyes darting between them, clearly strategizing how she could benefit most from the chaos. I felt suffocated, trapped in a web of manipulation spun by the very people I had devoted my life to nurturing. That night, I made a decision that changed everything. I told James I no longer considered him my son. The words tasted bitter on my tongue, but the clarity they brought was liberating. I realized then that living to please others had cost me not only my peace but also my dignity. By prioritizing their needs above mine, I had allowed myself to become a pawn in their games, sacrificing pieces of my soul along the way. Looking back, I see now how intertwined this struggle was with other battles I faced earlier. Just as I learned to guard myself against toxic relationships, I should have applied the same discernment here. Instead, I let guilt and obligation blind me, mistaking compliance for love. And much like the pain of discovering Sarah's betrayal, this ordeal taught me that trust must be earned, not freely given out of desperation for connection. Each lesson reinforced the next, building a foundation upon which I could finally stand firm. In the end, I chose to keep the house, not because it was practical or wise, but because it symbolized who I am and what I value. If my children couldn't respect that, then perhaps they didn't deserve the privilege of inheriting it. This chapter of my life has been painful, yes, but it has also been transformative. I've reclaimed my voice, my agency, and most importantly, my right to live for myself. No longer will I sacrifice my happiness for the sake of others' approval. This is my story, my legacy, and I intend to write it on my own terms. As I sit here reflecting on the choices that have shaped my later years, one truth stands out above all. Protecting myself from toxic people, an act of cruelty, it's an act of survival. The weight of this realization hit me hardest when I found myself caught between two impossible decisions involving those closest to me, my grandson and my daughter-in-law. My grandson, Daniel, had fallen into the clutches of addiction, a nightmare no grandparent should ever endure. What started as occasional requests for just a little help soon spiraled into relentless demands for money, each accompanied by promises he'd never keep. He would show up at my door, hollow-eyed and desperate, guilt-tripping me with tales of how his life was falling apart if I didn't give him what he wanted. And then there was Emily, my adopted daughter, who turned out to be nothing more than a master manipulator. She wasn't content with merely draining my finances. She began abusing me emotionally and physically under the guise of caregiving. Every mealtime became a battlefield. Every conversation laced with insults designed to make me feel small and powerless. The tension reached its breaking point one fateful evening. Daniel stormed into my house uninvited, demanding cash while threatening vague consequences if I refused. Meanwhile, Emily stood in the corner, arms crossed, smirking as though she enjoyed watching the chaos unfold. It was then that I realized the depth of their toxicity. They weren't just taking advantage of me individually, they were feeding off each other's greed, creating a perfect storm of manipulation and betrayal. That night, I faced the most agonizing decision of my life: call the police on Daniel or continue enduring his destructive behavior. The thought of turning in my own flesh and blood felt like tearing out a piece of my soul, but staying silent meant sacrificing what little peace I had left. In that moment, memories flooded back. The countless times Sarah betrayed my trust, James's selfish schemes, and Mark's endless pleas for financial support. Each betrayal had taught me something crucial about setting boundaries, yet somehow I still struggled to apply those lessons fully. But now, staring down the barrel of losing everything, including my dignity, I knew I couldn't let fear dictate my actions anymore. So, trembling with resolve, I picked up the phone and dialed 911. As the officers led Daniel away, tears streaming down his face, I felt both relief and devastation wash over me. Relief because I had finally drawn a line in the sand, and devastation because part of me feared it might be too late to salvage any semblance of family. Looking back, I see how interconnected these struggles were. Just as I learned to protect myself from Sarah's deceit and James's greed, I needed to extend that same vigilance to Daniel and Emily. Their actions weren't isolated incidents. They were symptoms of a larger pattern of exploitation that I had tolerated for far too long. By choosing to distance myself from them, I reclaimed not only my safety, but also my self-respect. Though painful, this decision marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where I prioritize my well-being over misplaced loyalty. As I sit alone in my dimly lit study, the faint hum of the ceiling fan above me blending with the distant chirping of crickets outside, I can't help but reflect on how much of my life has been spent waiting for someone to notice, to appreciate, to say thank you. For years, I poured every ounce of myself into raising my children, caring for my late husband during his illness, and even taking in Emily as a foster daughter when she had no one else. And yet, here I am now, staring at an old leather-bound journal filled with entries detailing sacrifices that no one ever acknowledged. It's a cruel irony, isn't it? To have given so much and received so little recognition in return. The pages of this journal are worn from countless nights spent scribbling by candlelight, chronicling moments of exhaustion, heartache, and silent resilience. There was the time I worked 2 jobs to put James through college while barely sleeping 4 hours a night. Or the year I sold my wedding ring to pay off Mark's medical bills after his accident. Even the smallest acts, the meals prepared, the sleepless nights spent worrying about Daniel's future, the endless stream of advice offered to Sarah, none of it seemed to matter anymore. No one read these words. No one cared enough to ask what they meant. My sacrifices became invisible, swallowed whole by the relentless march of time and ingratitude. But nothing cut deeper than the betrayal I witnessed just months ago, when the reality of human selfishness hit me like a freight train. The argument began innocently enough. A casual discussion about inheritance turned into a shouting match over who deserved what. James accused Mark of greed, claiming he didn't contribute enough to the family's well-being. Mark shot back, accusing James of being absent most of his life, despite benefiting from my hard work. Meanwhile, Emily sat quietly in the corner, her calculating eyes darting between them, clearly strategizing how best to position herself once the dust settled. They spoke as though I weren't even there, as if their mother, the woman who sacrificed everything for them, were merely a bystander in her own story. What broke me wasn't the anger or the accusations. It was the realization that none of them remembered why we were having this conversation in the first place. Not one of them mentioned the sacrifices I'd made, the sleepless nights, the years of labor that allowed them to stand where they were today. Instead, they argued over material possessions, treating me like a relic whose only value lay in what I could leave behind. In that moment, something inside me snapped. All those years of hoping for gratitude, for acknowledgement, felt wasted. Why had I waited so long for validation that would never come? And so I made a decision, one that would change everything forever. With trembling hands, I drafted a letter to my lawyer, instructing him to donate my entire estate to charity upon my death. Every last penny, every cherished possession would go to organizations helping struggling families, abandoned children, and elderly individuals living in poverty. When I announced my decision to my children, the room fell silent, their faces twisted in shock, disbelief, and finally shame. James tried to reason with me, pleading that I reconsider, but I saw the truth in his eyes. He wasn't concerned about me. He was worried about losing what he thought was rightfully his. Mark stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him, while Emily remained eerily calm, likely already devising a plan to contest the will. For days afterward, guilt gnawed at me. Was I being too harsh? Had I let my bitterness cloud my judgment? But then I remembered all the times I'd hoped for recognition, only to be met with silence. I thought about the nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if anyone truly understood the weight of what I'd given up for them. This wasn't about punishment. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my worth. If my children couldn't see the value in my sacrifices now, perhaps they never would. And if that was the case, then my legacy shouldn't belong to them. It should belong to those who might actually benefit from it. In the weeks that followed, something remarkable happened. Slowly, hesitantly, my children began reaching out. James sent me a letter apologizing for his behavior, admitting he hadn't fully appreciated all I'd done for him. Mark called one evening, his voice choked with emotion, saying he wished he could turn back time and do things differently. Even Emily visited, tears streaming down her face as she confessed she'd taken advantage of my kindness. Watching them fumble through their apologies, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Perhaps it was too late for us to rebuild what had been lost, but at least they finally understood the depth of my sacrifice. Looking back, I realized this chapter of my life wasn't just about teaching my children a lesson. It was about freeing myself from the chains of expectation. Just as I learned to distance myself from toxic relationships and prioritize my own needs, I had to accept that my worth wasn't tied to others' perceptions of me. By letting go of the need for external validation, I found peace, not because someone finally said thank you, but because I chose to honor myself. At 80 years old, I thought my life had settled into its final chapter, a quiet existence where every day blended seamlessly with the next. But fate, it seems, had other plans for me. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves danced in the wind outside my window, I made a decision that would send shock waves through my family. I was going to learn how to drive. The idea had been simmering in my mind for months, born out of frustration at relying on others for even the simplest errands. Yet when I announced this bold plan during Sunday dinner, the room erupted into chaos. James, ever the voice of caution, immediately protested, citing safety concerns and claiming I'd be a danger to myself and others. Mark chimed in with exaggerated tales of elderly drivers causing accidents, while Emily sat silently, her disapproving glare speaking volumes. Their arguments felt like walls closing in around me, but something inside refused to back down. The tension escalated further when another revelation came to light. My intention to reconnect with an old flame from decades past, someone who had once held my heart before life pulled us in different directions. His name was Robert, and after losing his wife 2 years prior, he reached out to rekindle our long-lost friendship. What began as harmless phone calls soon blossomed into something deeper, igniting a spark I hadn't felt in years. When I mentioned the possibility of remarriage, the reaction was nothing short of volcanic. My children accused me of being reckless, selfish, and naive. "You're too old for such nonsense," James shouted, his face red with indignation. Even Daniel, my grandson whose own life was spiraling out of control due to addiction, mocked the idea, saying I should act my age. It was infuriating yet strangely liberating. Their resistance only fueled my determination to prove them wrong. But just as I began navigating these turbulent waters, an unexpected opportunity presented itself. A local community center offered free workshops on digital literacy aimed at seniors looking to embrace technology. Despite initial hesitation, I signed up, eager to challenge myself further. Little did I know this decision would transform my life entirely. Within weeks, I discovered a passion for creating content, short videos documenting my journey of self-discovery, resilience, and defiance against societal expectations. I started uploading them to YouTube under the name Golden Age Adventures, sharing everything from my first disastrous driving lesson, where I accidentally honked at a squirrel, to heartfelt conversations with Robert about love and loss. To everyone's astonishment, including my own, my channel gained traction rapidly, amassing thousands of subscribers eager to witness the adventures of an octogenarian refusing to let age define her. As comments poured in from viewers worldwide praising my courage, I realized I wasn't just defying my family. I was inspiring countless others to break free from their own limitations. This newfound purpose gave me strength I didn't know I possessed. Driving lessons became less daunting, and dates with Robert grew sweeter, filled with laughter and memories we thought lost forever. Looking back, I see now how interconnected this transformation was with earlier struggles. Just as I learned to protect myself from toxic relationships and prioritize my happiness over others' demands, I applied those same principles here. Age was no longer a barrier, it was a badge of honor, proof that growth is possible at any stage of life. In the end, I passed my driving test on the third attempt, much to James's disbelief, and officially moved in with Robert 6 months later. Together we celebrated not just our second chance at love, but also my unlikely rise as a social media sensation. Every mile I drove, every video I uploaded, reminded me that life doesn't stop when you turn 80. It simply offers new roads to explore. And though my family still grumbles about my choices, they can't deny the joy radiating from me now. This chapter of my life has taught me that change isn't reserved for the young. It belongs to anyone brave enough to embrace it. Every morning as the sun began its slow ascent over the horizon, I found myself standing at the same weathered gravestone, tracing my fingers over the engraved name of my son, Michael. It had been 10 years since he left us, taken too soon by a reckless driver who ran a red light. But no matter how many sunrises I greeted or how many seasons passed, the wound in my heart remained raw, unhealed. The cemetery became my sanctuary, a place where memories of him felt most vivid, the laughter we shared, the dreams I once nurtured for his future. Yet, with each visit, I could feel myself slipping further away from the present, tethering my soul to a past that refused to let go. My family noticed it too, though not always kindly. James would often scold me, saying, "Mom, you can't keep living like this. Michael is gone." His words stung, but they were nothing compared to Emily's biting remarks. "You're stuck in your own world, comparing everything now to how perfect things used to be." Their frustration was palpable, yet so was their growing resentment. The tension reached a breaking point one evening during dinner, a meal I barely touched because my mind was still lingering on Michael's absence. Mark brought up plans for renovating the house, something practical and forward-thinking. But instead of engaging, I drifted into nostalgia. This house doesn't feel the same without him, I murmured aloud, unaware of how sharp those words cut through the room. James slammed his fist on the table, his voice rising with anger. Enough, Mom. Enough about back then. You act like life stopped when Michael died, but it didn't. We're still here, trying to move forward. Tears filled my eyes, but before I could respond, Emily chimed in, her tone icy. She won't listen. She's too busy clinging to the past, pretending today isn't worth anything. That night I lay awake, haunted by their accusations and consumed by guilt. Was I truly holding everyone back? Had I become so entrenched in grief that I failed to see the pain I caused others? Images of Michael flooded my mind, followed by flashes of happier times, family vacations, birthday parties, lazy Sunday afternoons. But alongside these memories came darker thoughts. The countless arguments with James over trivial matters, the strained silences at meals, the way Emily avoided looking me in the eye. I realized then that while I mourned the loss of my son, I had also been neglecting the people who remained. The turning point came unexpectedly. As I sorted through an old cedar chest tucked away in the attic, I stumbled upon boxes of photographs, letters, and trinkets tied to Michael's memory. Each item carried a piece of him, but also a weight that pressed heavily on my chest. For hours I sat amidst the relics of my past, tears streaming down my face. Then, as if guided by some unseen force, I made a decision, one that terrified me but felt undeniably necessary. I gathered every photo, every letter, every memento, and carried them outside to the backyard. With trembling hands, I lit a match and watched as flames devoured the remnants of my past. It wasn't easy. Screams of protest echoed in my mind, urging me to stop. But beneath the anguish was a flicker of hope, a chance to reclaim my life. In the days that followed, I felt lighter, as though I had shed chains that bound me to sorrow. When I returned to the cemetery the next week, I placed fresh flowers on Michael's grave and whispered, I'll always love you, but I need to live for those who are still here. Surprisingly, the air felt clearer, the sky brighter. Back home, conversations with James and Emily shifted subtly. They softened, becoming less defensive, more open. Though scars remained, healing began to take root. Looking back, I understood that letting go wasn't forgetting. It was choosing to honor the present, to embrace the beauty of what still existed. And in doing so, I rediscovered joy, not just for myself, but for the family I nearly lost in my quest to hold on to the past.